and whether your shirt's tucked in or whatnot. But we'll take it from where you're taking it. It's about personal appearance. Maybe it depends who you are. The follow-up question to that is, if it depends who you are, so then you have to know
Who are you?
who you are. Right? If it depends on who the person is, so then you'd ask, well, great. So I wonder if appearance is important for me. It depends who I am. So there's a beautiful passage in the Talmud which gives us clarity, or it gives us an insight into how can you tell who a person is. It's a really short passage, and in order to translate that, I'd love to use images rather than words. We'll read it in Aramaic, an ancient language. Amar Rabbi Lai b'shlosha dvarim adam nikar. With three things a person is recognized in life. One is bakosa, how they drink. Not my kids. Okay, if they're not, put that on the screen in front of 60 other people that can report me to. Perhaps on Google you can find out who it is, and we should all report that person. You can find out what a person's like bakosa, with their cup, how they drink. What does that mean? How they handle their alcohol, right? Does a person have high tolerance or low tolerance? Why does that really tell you what the person's like in terms of, I happen to have, unfortunately, a little too much, carry a little too much with me, and my tolerance is higher because I got more, so does that mean I'm a different type of person because I can handle my alcohol better than other people who might not have? Yeah, Sarah?
The truth comes out when someone has had a little too much to drink. Their inhibitions go down, and you find out who they are.
Super. So maybe it's not how you handle it, it's how you act when you have it in your system. Right? They always tell you, if you don't like your boss, don't go drinking with them. Right? The last thing you want to do is let your guard down and say, hey, by the way, what are you really thinking? And you say what you really think of your boss and what she's like, and right? You're careful what you say. Now, all of a sudden you have a couple drinks. If you want to see what a person's like, and I do know people that actually use this strategy in dating back in the day when I was in New York University, they tried to, actually I was surprised on both sides. Some of my girlfriends, some of my boyfriends, they were sitting there and saying, you know what, I always love to sit there and take people out for drinks because it loosens them up and I get to see what they really think. And you actually can find out a lot about a person that way. Is that really who they are?
Yeah.
Huh?
Like a heightened version.
Okay, a heightened version? Which is more accurate? What they would say when they happen to go ahead and have something in their system. Don't forget, Purim, it's a mitzvah to drink. It's a commandment. Right? I personally don't know why people celebrate Yom Kippur like it's the most important one. If I had a choice between Yom Kippur and Purim, I would definitely, we should be flocking around Purim, right? So we'll talk to your boobies and zanies about this one, but we'll pick a different day. So which is really more accurate for who they are? When they're drinking or when they're not drinking?
That's how often they drink.
Okay. Okay, why is that?
Drink every day, then that's who you are.
And then that's who you are.
Once a year in Purim.
Right, so depending what your addiction to it might be, but what you're saying when you do it, or how you act when you drink, is that more you or less you? Okay, we'll leave it there. Or we'll take Sarah's question. Yeah.
No, it's not a
Or
question.
an answer, yeah.
I think it gives a fairly good assessment of who the person is. It's maybe a more extreme version because the person isn't, they're not using their better judgment, they're not using their, they're not guarding themselves. But you will find out if somebody's a happy drunk, an angry drunk, etc. Right?
Super. Okay, great. So there is something to that, and we're going to come back to it a little bit more. So that's the first one, Bikoso. The second one, the Talmud shares, says if you really want to know what a person's like, we have a phrase for this in English. I can start it, and if it really is a common phrase, you're probably able to finish it. Put your
Money where your mouth is.
fantastic. So it says the second one, kiso, is your pocket, your wallet. Right? A lot of people say, you know what, I really love to help out. Okay, so why don't I think it's a really important cause. See where a person spends their money. Right? They tell a story of a person who used to go fundraising. And walked some big, really well-to-do person, beautiful house, walks in and says, I'm collecting for a certain cause. I thought maybe you can give whatever as luck as it was. I'm sure it was in Europe. Every story happens in Europe for some reason. And it happened in the 1800s. No stories ever happened after 1800 and none other countries in Europe. So, 10,000 zlotys. The guy says, listen, the truth is I'd love to, but you know what, I'm really, it's mortgaged. The house is mortgaged. I don't really have the money. It's not mine. I'm sorry. And he's like, I understand that, and then meanwhile, in comes like, a delivery person dropping off something from like Hope Renfrew or the 1800 European equivalent of whatever they had back then, which is probably, Beta Sax, I don't know, but nice it is, right? So he comes, he says, well,
Hudson's Bay.
He says, well, that's like, that's borrowed also. And then somebody else, like, comes and says, oh, we're going to do landscaping, whatever. He says, well, that's also borrowed. And then, and on and on and on, he's got all these things. He says, okay, so you can borrow your money to buy things for yourself, but when it comes to sharing with others, like that, sorry, you don't have anything. And very often we can tell a lot. I think that's where the money, where your mouth is. It's easy to say, but what do you actually do? What do you invest in something? Not only financially, but we have a harder time parting with those things. It says, if you want to see what a person's like, see where they spend their money. If I think my wife is important, I'll spend more on her than I might spend on myself. If I think charity, whatever it might be. You can get a gauge of a person that way. Third thing, Picasso. What's Picasso? The only thing I can find is, I sort of know who one of them is. That's got to be Sandler.
Yeah.
Or Jack Nicholson. Okay, great. So, isn't he a golfer? No, that's Jack Nicholson. Okay. Anger, right? Picasso, when they're angry. You want to see what a person's like. Get them a little bit angry. Right? See what they say when they sort of lose their cool. Their guard is down. Someone says, if you want to really start to see what a person's like, right? All these things are sort of facades. The way I might act one way, I'll walk in, and obviously I'll say certain things to my boss, if you use that example that we used over there, or interacting with people, and I'll be careful, I'll watch my words. It might not be what I'm thinking, or what I'd really like to say, but pragmatically, I know that I really can't. There used to be, back in the day when I think, I don't know if it's good again, Saturday Night Live used to be really good. I'm not sure if it's good anymore, not at all. Back in the day when it was really good with like Bill Murray, there was a skit I remember seeing where he goes to visit a friend of his, and he knocks on the door and he's like, hey, like Doug, it's great to see you. Right? And then Doug, opens the door and sees like Bill there. He says, hey Bill, great to see you also. Then there's a voiceover. Oh, darn, Bill, why do you have to come over? And then, Bill goes, well, you know what, I was just in the area, I thought I'd pop in. And then there's a voiceover, Bill saying, I was just in the area, so I thought I'd pop in. And then Doug's like, that's great, why don't you come into my house? Voiceover, why don't you, trip on my front doorstep and have to get, right? On and on. Bill's saying things, and he actually means it. Doug says things, and it's really not what he's thinking, but it's just what he's conditioned and how he's supposed to act. So the question is, which one is more? So when a person has a few drinks, what a person says, right? The second one, put your money where your mouth is. If you think something is really important, what do? You might look a certain way on the outside, but inside, and people don't know that, right? Where do you go ahead and invest? And number three, when a person's guard is down, they're angry. This can tell a lot about a person. I know people actually that are scared to get drunk because they're very worried. They have drunk buddies that tell them when they're about, not because they're driving, but because they say, make sure I don't go too far, because the truth is, I have no clue what I'm going to say or what's going to come out, but they know what's inside of them, right? So there's a chance. Those are three things. Perhaps. There's a fourth thing that a lot of people don't, even people that are familiar with this passage and Tom would love to quote this. I think it's just because of the what's it called?
Alliteration.
Thanks, Montana. The alliteration, right? It's kind of good, right? Then there's a third thing they say. The fourth thing, sorry. The fourth thing. Anybody know the fourth thing that they say? So the fourth thing, along comes people and says, actually, you know what you can also tell somebody about? You can tell the amule after. You can also tell what their laughter is about. There's two words for laughter, because Purim is supposed to be a joyous day as well. Right? There's laughing in English we call laughing at, or almost mocking, or laughing with. There's certain things that people sort of make fun of, which is interesting, because we're also conditioned not to make fun of things, but certain things we just feel the need to mock or to put down, as if that's a way of being able to go ahead and express ourselves. Certain things we laugh at and say, oh, wasn't that funny? And certain things we say, oh, wasn't that isn't that silly? It's not ridiculous, it's just stupid. You can tell a lot by what a person denigrates, what they laugh at, what they mock. So when we come to Purim, and the topic of tonight's discussion, it's really what does it mean to wear masks and to take off masks. Granted, if I walked in here wearing a gorilla suit, no one would say like, oh my gosh, there's a gorilla here, right? You'd be like, okay, who's wearing the stupid suit, right? You wouldn't, not for a second you'd be fooled. And if I started to go to a zoo and jump into a cage, I'd be torn into bits. Because as much as I'd like to pretend that I'm a gorilla, I'm not a gorilla. And you'd know that. You'd see right through it. But some masks are actually harder to see because they're not costumes. So we've got masks. Definition that I looked up for masks is an article normally worn on the face, typically for protection or to concealment. It means we wear something or we are something on the outside because we either want to protect something that we don't want other people to get at, see, or know, or to conceal, to hide something. That's why people will put on masks. There's another word that I thought in terms of appearance. Appearance, and this is what Rabbi Josh was saying, appearance, right, is the way things seem to be. We always say, well, things might not seem to be as they appear, right? But appearance is the way things seem to be on the outside. And when you start thinking about really Purim, which is a day where we put on masks, the question is, are we really putting on masks? So, the line on the top, can you see that? So I thought to myself, what about people that actually wear masks for a living? So we might do certain things and act certain ways that might not be who we are. And Purim might be a day where we dress up. But there are people who actually, their lives are to dress up. So I actually asked Ace, back in my day he was known as BJ Prudy, what exactly, a friend of mine for several years, was Ace on the field. And I said, hey, I'm just curious, what's it like living in a costume for like your life, or 3 years of it? His response was phenomenal. What a great question. First of all, that was nice. What a great question. Some guys use the costume as an amplifier, meaning they're by nature loud, brash, obnoxious, etc. Others, they use it as a switch. They exhibit none of those qualities in life. But once the costume is on, ... With me, we should be proud of our mascot. With me, I tried best not to do anything in costume that I wouldn't have done out of costume. It's so beautiful. I imagine your talk has to do with masks, and he's a smart birdie. Right? There is a certain emancipation that comes with assuming another character or persona, but dignity should always be first and foremost. People wear masks. Sometimes actually, ironically, putting on a mask allows me to express more of who I might be, or to amplify that than when I don't wear. Imagine you go to a place where nobody knows you. All of a sudden, what you might be capable of doing, you're saying, oh, you know what, no one knows me here, it doesn't matter. In and of itself, that means, wait, so when people do know you, there's certain things you wouldn't do. And when people don't know you, i.e. you have a mask, no one knows who you are, then there are other things you do. So are masks good things or bad things? Well, obviously it's great that I wouldn't curse out my boss every day I walk into work. The last thing I want to say is, hey, if that's what you're thinking, have a drink every day and just flip them pretty. Right? So obviously, right, you say that wouldn't be what you have to do. Right? On the flip side, this is where the struggle is. Like Rabbi Josh was saying, is it a good thing, is it a bad thing? Right? Who am I? Which one really is me, which one isn't? So we spoke about Purim and Yom Kippur. If you were to ask somebody, and some of you might know this teaching, we're going to take it to a totally different place. It's a beautiful one to share. If you were to walk down the street in Yorkville, Jewish, not Jewish, happened to everybody watches the movies, and you said, what's the holiest day of the Jewish year? Throw it out.
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. Right? You can't get holier. Go on the bottom, what the heck does holy mean? That's a whole separate question. Right? I am holy, I feel holy, and so holy, what does holy mean? Right? I am hungry, it is so right? What is it? Fine. Yom Kippur. People would say Yom Kippur. Right? There's a beautiful teaching. If you walk away with only one thing, actually no, walk away with everything. But this one thing is also a beautiful thing you should definitely walk away with. Right? There's a teaching by the Yorkville, a 15th century Kabbalist, which says that actually Yom Kippur is not bad, it's the second holiest day. It's not bad, but it's number 2. And he says, where do you actually see this? He says, you see it in our own Bible. Where do you see it? He says, if you look in the Torah, Yom Kippur is actually called Yom Kippurim. That's the name of it. Right? It doesn't say the word. The word's Yom Kippur. Anything that a person might observe as Yom Kippur, that word does not exist in any source that's of ancient tradition. We just shorten it that way and call it Yom Kippur. You won't find those words. You can Google it on the 5 books. I think Old Testament, New Testament, any Testament you want. Right? It's called Yom Kippurim. So as you know, for those who've read or chanted from the Torah, bar mitzvahs, bas mitzvahs, if you've read there, one of the difficult things, the reason why people get so anxious about reading from the Torah is because it doesn't have any vowels, right? It's like the opposite of the Wheel of Fortune thing, where you have to like buy there are no vowels to buy, and you got to sort of know your words. So it's very scary to get up there. So we just, often assume, well, that's because, like they just didn't have vowels back then, or it was too hard, it gets too messy, right? There's a principle that Kabbalists teach that actually words can reconfigure, right? If it says something, just like we know words can have different meanings, words can reconfigure. And if you know about Yom Kippur, which is Yom Kippur over here, Yom Kippur can also be read another way. For those, I know there's one person here who's Israeli that I met. Not originally Israeli, well, there's another person Israeli, there's probably a few people. So if you have a little bit of Hebrew knowledge, if I would sit there and highlight the following, rather than say Yom Kippurim, but rather say Yom Kippurim, Ki as a prefix means light. So in fact what you're saying in your Rizal teaches is Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur, is a day Ki like Purim. So first of all, it's just like the weirdest thing, because the truth is, if we were to say, great, let's line up Yom Kippur, right? We're going to put in your Rizal's 1500s, he's buried up in Spot, you can go take it up with him over there if you want, and say, listen, Kabbalah is great and interesting and fine, but this one you went a little bit off the deep end, because if I could think of two holidays which are the most, what's the word? Diametrically opposed, even better, this is it. So Yom Kippur, what are some of the things we do on Yom Kippur? Great. Pray. Repent. I don't even know what that means, but we do it. Repent. Yeah.
A lot more don'ts.
A lot more don'ts, right? Fantastic. So some of the Yom Kippur things, fast, no eating, you sort of dress up, everybody wears their finest whatever, they go out there, it's quiet, because like very serene and quiet, and the cantor's doing his thing, solemn prayer. It's actually interesting, the day before, if you don't know this, we just added on another fun mitzvah into your repertoire, there's a mitzvah the day before Yom Kippur to eat. It says Yom Kippur is supposed to be observed on the 9th and the 10th of the month of Tishrei, which is the month where it calls out, and there's a mitzvah to eat on the 9th. So you can thank me later for that, but rack it up the day before Yom Kippur, and no drinking, no anything. Then you go over to the other side, so if we were to compare, so you send food packages door to door, you wear your finest Avatar costume. I don't even know why I chose Avatar, it's such an intense costume. Grinders, captains, kazoos, spend all day singing and dancing. Day before is a mitzvah to fast, actually, interestingly enough. So it's even the opposite the day before, Tanya Dester. Which is actually tomorrow as opposed to the long story. And no drinking, hey, it's a mitzvah. It's perfect. You actually have a commandment to drink to the point where you can't go ahead and distinguish between a guy like Haman and a guy like Mordechai. They seem exactly the same to you. That's how smashed you have to get. And along comes the Arizal, and the Arizal says, hey, aren't these days exactly the same? Yom Kippur is not bad, pretty holy, and Purim, now that really is holy. Right? And when you say something is like something else, that means the original is obviously greater. If I say, back in my high school days I played like Michael Jordan, right, which is a total lie on all the fronts, but it means he's better, and I played like him. If Yom Kippur is a day like Purim, it means Purim's up there, and Yom Kippur's not bad, close, but not exactly the right thing. It's nuts. I'm stumped. That's all you. Yeah.
Well,
Joel?
Yeah. Well, perhaps, what do we say? Some people say that Yom Kippur, it's like we're being like angels, right? So it's very easy to live your life like angels. But it's harder, let's say, in today's day and age, to bring down spirituality, I guess, and making Judaism real to yourself in today's world and in the world that we live in, regardless of time period. So perhaps it's a holier day or a better day, a higher day, because you're bringing holiness to the regular kind of mundane things you may do. Oh, I'm going to go and drink, or I'm going to get dressed up for a party, or whatever. But I bring in holiness into that space as opposed to, it's quite easy for me to get dressed up in a white shirt and and a suit and tie and everything else, and sit in the shul all day long and say, oh, well, that's I'm going to be holy. So it's kind of, I guess it's the difference between somebody who's working in a university, say, or in an ivory tower, versus I'm working in Bay and Dundas and making something happen.
I think, Joel, it's a beautiful idea, right? It's easy to go ahead and be, great. Imagine a person was locked in a room by themselves for 24 hours and they came out and said, guess what? I didn't go ahead and curse anybody out. Didn't speak any bad words about anybody, didn't anything, Of course not. You had no opportunity to do that. And the truth is, next time, on our second annual Purim one, we get this, it's a beautiful train of thought to go down, because the truth is people think that Judaism is about what happens in the synagogue. It's the opposite. It's what happens on Bay Street. It's about how you live your life, how you interact with people. We can talk about what the purpose of a synagogue is. I used to not fully believe in them. I believe in them a lot more now, to be perfectly honest. There's a certain, just because they pay my paycheck, no. But I actually think they do have a tremendous value, which I never appreciated a few years ago. But that's where you might get nourished. But the truth is, a person who just sits there all day and doesn't interact with people and express those values, and let's be honest, where is it harder to express the values? In business, they tell a story, if I can sidetrack a little bit. They tell a story of a person who used to be the ritual slaughterer. It's called a shochet for the entire city. And one day he goes up and he says, you know what? He says, too much pressure, I gotta stop doing it. He says, what do you mean too much pressure? He says, there's so many laws about how to cut and like beautiful laws about the sensitivity towards it. Again, let's not go there. But if you're gonna eat animals anyhow, then all the sensitivities about how you go about that, and you can't even have a nick in the knife because then that'll cause an extra thing. He says, if I get it wrong, and if I get it wrong, everyone in the town's not eating kosher meat, right? So it's inflated for no purpose whatsoever, because now it's not kosher anyhow. He says, I can't handle the pressure. So Rabbi says, fine, I get that. A lot of laws. He says, what are you going to do? He says, I don't know, I'm going to go into business. He says, okay, I get that. It's a little less pressure. So he calls him over to a bookshelf. And he says, you recognize these books? And he says, of course I recognize those books. That's about 50 chapters worth of the books of the laws of how to make sure your meat is kosher. He says, that's what I'm saying. 50, chapters just to get this. He says, I can't do that. He says, do you recognize these books called Choshen Mishpat, which is sort of like judgment books? He says, you know what these are about? He says, and what are those? He says, those are the laws of business. They're about 200 chapters. He says, you think it's hard to be a Jewish ritual slaughterer? He says, it's much harder to be a Jewish value-driven businessman, ethical and honest. And how you treat people, speak about them, undercut the market and everything like that. That's really, I think Joel's point, that it's actually a lot harder to engage in the world and maintain holiness than to disengage and move to a mountaintop, which again has its attraction, and say, hey, look, I'm so holy, may not interact with it. Great suggestion. We'll save that to explore another time. But that's the one that I first learned. It's great. Beautiful. Anybody else? So I'd like to suggest if we're using our masks, and I was just thinking about this year, that's why I enjoy teaching, because it makes you think. What are the goal of these days? That would have been the first question I think Joel answered. The goal of this day, one centers you, and one's about expressing it perhaps. But then I thought, in light of what we're talking about, what do you think about this question? Which day are we really wearing masks? Meaning, who am I really? The beautiful thing about Jewish thought is it often turns things on its head, which is a wonderful thing. It's called olam hapuk, upside down world. This would be a beautiful discussion one day also. We think that there's poor people and rich people, and the poor people need the rich people. The Talmud says the opposite. A person can't express their purpose in this world unless there's people to express it. That's why you have parents and children, right? Everything's always upside down, right? There's an inscription that I wrote in something to give to Michael afterwards, which is about how it's really upside down when you think you're doing something. So which one really is the mask? Am I the Yom Kippur person expressing myself? Or am I a Purim person expressing myself? Yeah.
I think they're a reflection of short-term and long-term goals. So Purim is more of short-term, I want to go have fun, I don't care. And then Yom Kippur is more, I want to spend time taking care of my internal self and giving back. So I feel like that's more a reflection of long-term goals.
Beautiful idea. Tara, was it?
Yeah.
Beautiful idea, right? It goes and it possibly contradicts what the Arizal said, because the Arizal saying, wait, Purim is that much more important, and so it's not just that I want to go out and feel and drink. So he's got to find some kind of meaning in that. That's beyond just saying, hey, you know what, life's short, live hard, drink for tomorrow, whatever the phrase is, you got to do what you got to do now. But that's great, and it's not an answer. It's a question to pose. My Rebbe, one of my teachers, always just posed questions. Never gave me answers because answers are so personal. So how can I provide an answer to a question that a person really has to, engage in themselves? Mentioned by Zara. So if we understand Purim and drinking, because that's really something that, again, when I look around, it's the go-to. Not in a bad way of like, oh, like you were saying, like person's always drinking, just like, hey, right? So I was thinking about the words that we sometimes use with this dichotomy of like what a person says. So I don't know if it's still relevant, but again, I am a little bit older than I like to actually admit to myself. I'm happy to admit it to you, but I have a hard time understanding the recording. Right? Niflas yain yatsa sod. The phrase is when wine goes in, out come secrets. And I was thinking about the terminology that's used. I'm sure there's more, and tell me if these are accurate or not. That's one word that's sometimes used when a person drinks a lot. That's another word, and that's another word. So these images, I think, are, right? So you can be smashed, right? You're wasted, trashed, right? These are there more phrases? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are. But when a person, oh my gosh, he was wasted, right? Like, oh, totally trashed, smashed. I think there's something with like a k and a r in there. I don't know what the word is. I remember hearing a couple people saying, I don't know what it means. What? Crumb? Yeah, I don't know what that is, but it just sounds like something. All right? Just, hey, I'm having a lot, and what do we describe? We describe it, right? Oh, well, why do we say that? Right? Well, that's what happens. It's interesting, we have a custom of drinking as well. And if Purim is a day where we're supposed to drink, and assumption, like Tara said, it's not just, hey, you know what, it doesn't matter who you are, just let loose. But it's actually, like the Arizal says, one of the holier days. We do something on wine every week. Please God, in 2 weeks I'll have the privilege of standing under someone's chuppah, marrying, not them, marrying like 2 of the other people, because my wife would be really weird if that happened. And we do something called like kiddush, or kiddushin, kodesh. Kodesh, right? Kodesh is the same word for what we started at the beginning, holy. Right? We say blessings to make things holy, but wait, we make holy. Like wine? I remember I had a very good friend, I haven't been in touch with him for about 37 years. But I'm sure we'd be friends again. Not 37, probably more like 31. But I remember he was a Catholic individual, and he would always ask me, he says, why do you Jews say your blessings over wine? Isn't that the work of the devil? It's like, whatever, water's holy. And I thought it was like a super great question, the truth is. Like wine is like, alcohol. Like why would you do that? But alcohol, like we started in the beginning, nothing's good or bad. There's nothing in Jewish, in Veltan Shan, the worldview of Jewish thought, nothing is good or bad. It's how and when we use it, and who is the person using it. So a person can have a drink and actually say, hey, you know what? When you drink, certain things come out. Yeah, we have certain inhibitions inside as well. Certain things that we sometimes are feeling or thinking that, you know what? We just don't feel comfortable expressing. We don't want to be judged. We don't want people to know. Let's be honest. We all think. We're always thinking. One of the things I actually love about the house and the rest of the world is that people have different sides to them. And certain places they can't express them or explore them because who would sit around a bar on Queen Street and be like, hey, I was thinking about what's the purpose of it? No, but inside we go home, we think about these things. We all think. We're all thinking people. And if they're not, then they don't jump in those things, right? We're all thinking people. Kiddush is something where we say, hey, you know what? Maybe there's something inside of me. Niflas yain, in goes wine, yatsa sod. Out comes a secret part of me, which the truth is I never really feel comfortable expressing, which is a beautiful thing. To find a way to be able to release something that's so deep inside someone, right? And access something that wouldn't be there. They say that Megillat Esther, at the holiday, the book that we're reading, the words if we break it down. Megillah, Legalot, Gilui. Anyone in Hebrew? Reveal. Megillah to reveal. Esther, Esther. Esther is from the word that which is hidden. And so the whole holiday of Purim, everything about it, again, this would be for 2, 3, 4, 5 annual Purims, we'll get there. But everything about Purim is about realizing there's so much under the surface. You think the story's like this, but there's a whole different subplot going on. And our job is to find a way to reveal, right? And ironically, we put on masks, we think we're masking. It's the opposite. Actually, what we're often doing is revealing on Purim certain parts of us which we might not ever get to. Now, you have to be on I won't call it a level, because that sounds judgment. You have to be confident that you're at a stage where you feel comfortable to express yourself and want to put that out there, which again is a whole different discussion. But it's so sad. There's so many relationships where people are thinking A and doing B. You have people in spousal relationships.